Julia. Welcome to RP23.
Pakistan, 2017. Amir is working with a humanitarian aid organization. He is university educated and fluent in English, Pashto, and Dari. 4 years later, he moves to Regensburg to get a master's degree. And as you do as a student, he gets a side job to cover his living expenses. He finds a job advertised as system analyst and is hired. Amir's job is the topic of today's talk, content moderation. Amir is moderating content for Facebook and Instagram. So you might be thinking now that his employer is Meta, but they're not. Meta is outsourcing their content moderation responsibility. Amir is working with an outsourcing company whose name you've probably never heard before. The early shift starts exactly at 8 a.m. and ends at 4:30 in the afternoon. Content moderators work in 3 shifts, day and night. The content moderation industry never sleeps. The system keeps track of his every move, how fast and how efficient he can sort through 200 up to 1,000 pieces of content per day. Amir is assigned Tier 1 material. Content moderators work in different tiers. Moderators who are moderating Tier 1 material are exposed to the most extreme content: beheadings, suicide, child abuse, animal abuse. Amir calls himself a brave heart. Coming from a warring country, he thinks that he has seen it all. But the content is worse, much worse than even he could think of. Amir says, it could just be 10 pieces of content. When one of them is a beheading or a child being abused, it can break you. A year later, he begins to have violent nightmares. His partner tells him that he's screaming during his sleep. In the morning, sitting on his balcony, he thinks about the violent content that he's subjected to. 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week. In 1 year, he has witnessed about 1,000 hours of violent acts, and he is broken. Wouldn't you be? He is diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. His company offers well-being counseling, but the people are not trained psychologists. Amir fears for his job and his privacy. He doesn't go, and instead turns to his health insurance for mental health care. Amir wants to quit his job, but he needs it to keep his visa. And after the COVID-19 pandemic has started, it's become even harder for people like him who are not fluent in German to find a good job. Keeping in mind Amir's educational background, his cultural and his political awareness, his language skills, and the grueling nature of the job, how much do you think Amir earns? 14 euros. His hourly wage is 14 euros here in Berlin. And high performance is not rewarded with a promotion. Amir's 3 years of experience is treated the same as a new employee on their first day. Amir says, it's not just the inappropriate pay, the traumatic content. For me, it's at the end of the day that I don't even feel appreciated. It's me who's keeping your social media feed flawless. Amir's story is just one of many. Between March and May this year, I have met 200 content moderators here in Germany and in Kenya. Superlab, together with the nonprofits Foxglove, Aspiration, and the German labor union Verdi, have hosted content moderator summits. Content moderators are the internet's essential safety workers. They protect all of us. They watch the most gruesome content so you and I don't have to. Without content moderators, there are no social media platforms. No content moderators, no social media platforms. As simple as that. Many of you are aware of the harsh job conditions in content moderation. Today, Daniel and I want to share some insights with you that you may not be aware of. Many of the content moderators that I have met are immigrants. Their residency permits are linked to their jobs, just like in Amir's case. A situation that is easy to exploit and that is being exploited by the employers. In Kenya, many of the content moderators have moved to Kenya, to Nairobi from their home countries. They come from Eritrea, Ethiopia, Burundi, Uganda, South Africa. They have left their home countries to escape war and poverty. They are young. For many, this is the first job after getting a university degree. There's a high rate of unemployment in the African countries. For many of these people, as educated as they are, they go without employment for years, so they take anything that comes their way. The jobs in content moderation are advertised as system analyst, process associate, customer service representative. These job titles further obscure the landscape of content moderation from public visibility. Imagine applying for a job as a customer service representative. Would you think that this would entail watching beheadings, child abuse, murder, and suicide on a daily basis? Probably not, and neither do these moderators. It struck me how often moderators told me about the fact that they did not know what they were getting themselves into when they took the jobs. One moderator said to me, "I feel that I was deceived into this job, Julia. I was brought to a foreign nation and enslaved." Being a content moderator is like working in an Amazon warehouse and a toxic waste dump at the same time. You have the pressure of the factory job, the time tracking, the surveillance, the targets, plus you have the extreme content. This is a toxic mix that no sane human can bear for a long time. What is important to acknowledge here is that this is not about the most gruesome content that you can imagine. This is about the most gruesome content someone else can imagine and post. You might be thinking to yourselves, why don't they just click off? Well, not possible. Some companies make it mandatory that content moderators watch the full length of the gruesome videos and annotate what they see. A lot of content developers, content moderators develop PTSD. They're physically, emotionally, mentally traumatized by their jobs. Many of them are never diagnosed. They take antidepressants, some take sleeping pills to block out the graphic images that their brains keep churning night after night. One moderator, I'll call her Laila, told me, if the employer finds out that you have mental health problems due to these jobs, they'll find a way to get rid of you. There's no professional psychological care. The employers offer in-house well-being counseling or resilience coaching by people who have no training in trauma. The counselors advise traumatized content moderators to breathe or to go for walks. Moderators don't trust these counselors that are employed by their employers. They suspect them spying on them rather than supporting them. Despite the importance of their work, content moderators are working behind the curtains, in the shadows. Big tech likes it best when we don't see them, when we don't know their faces and their names. Big tech likes us to believe that this is a job that anyone can do, that this is basic click work. But the opposite is the case. Moderators need deep cultural expertise on the content they moderate. We're speaking satire, political commentary, sarcasm, subcultural content, subtlety. The moderators have to navigate complex policies, policies that are issued by the social media companies. Policies can be updated daily. And if you think this is not challenging enough, then add surveillance and time pressure to the mix. Once you've understood the complexity of the job, you quickly realize that there's no quick technological fix to this. There's been talk for years that AI will replace these jobs. And still, here we are. While we are talking about AI, thousands of content moderators under the most precarious conditions are doing this job on a daily basis. The labor union Verdi estimates that it's more than 5,000 content moderators here in Germany alone. And even if AI becomes good enough to do parts of the job, what if exploiting humans is still cheaper than constantly training a system? This is a quote by Roy Chardy, the former CMO of a company working on AI and content moderation. He said in an interview, if you're looking at the system from a monetary perspective, then content moderation AI can't compete with $1.80 an hour. And with the $1.80, he refers to the average wage of content moderators in low-income countries. That's digital colonialism. It's farming out the most dangerous labor to populations in regions where pay is cheap and labor rights are not existent. We've learned to care about the supply chains of our sneakers, of our shoes, but we ignore the fact that there's an exploitative supply chain of a service that keeps our social media feeds flawless. We think it's not us. We're just posting pictures from Republica, our friends, and food on Instagram, not beheadings, suicides, and rape videos. Well, we don't grasp the systemic dimension of this, the business model that is based on algorithmic timelines that exacerbate the problem by pushing polarizing and extreme content. Resistance is rising. Moderators are organizing and fighting back. Moderators in Germany are starting works councils. They are joining the union. Moderators in Kenya just held a groundbreaking summit on May 1st, where 150 of them voted to form a union. Next week, on June 14th, there will be a hearing at the German Bundestag. So content moderators will be invited to the Bundestag for the first time to speak about their working conditions. It's about time. The big tech companies are powerful, but so are thousands of workers standing united for better working conditions. And they're even more powerful if users stand in solidarity with them, if we all echo what they have to say, if we stand with them in their fight. In Germany, 200 of them have signed a manifesto that will be launched next week. They demand fair pay, proper mental health support, the end of outsourcing, the end of unreasonable surveillance, and an end to the culture of secrecy. I want to bring in Daniel Mutong now. I hope he's here. He's a whistleblower, a labor rights activist, and a former content moderator. He was one of the first moderators who spoke out about the precarious, exploitative working conditions in 2019. Last year, his story was on the cover of Time magazine. Daniel is joining us virtually from South Africa. Daniel, hi, welcome. Daniel, I've talked about the working conditions and about how people get into these jobs. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you got into this job. Did you know what it entails when you took it?
Hi, Julia, and thank you everyone for giving me this opportunity. So in 2019, when I first applied for this job, I actually only knew that I was applying for a job named content moderation. But before I go ahead on that, please note that there are cases whereby, in fact, some of my colleagues were recruited under names such as call center agents and all of those things. So I applied, and then I went to Kenya. And when I went to Kenya, I did not actually know that I was going to be working for a social media company called Facebook. I did not even know that the job that I was going to be doing would potentially be toxic and cause me to end up with PTSD. In fact, I did not know about the job, safe to say that according to my understanding of the advert and me making sense of the advert, I understood that the job was going to be merely administrative in nature. So I was going to be doing administrative work, maybe moderating documents just like examiners do.
So, what did the job entail?
So once I arrived in Kenya, I did the induction. And during that induction process, no one actually told me, even at that point, that the job would be potentially graphic or that the job could potentially cause me to be sick or end up with mental health care problems. No one told me that until the time where I moderated one piece of content, a live video of a beheading. And that I think is the one thing that really took me off course and sort of determined the rest of my life, because after moderating that video of a live beheading, and this is not a movie, it was a video of a human being whose head was being cut off. So I moderated this video, and then I began having nightmares. I began having flashbacks and all of those things. And so I then realized that this job was actually very, very dangerous. And in fact, this job potentially would cause me to be sick. But at that time, nor did I know, and nor did I understand that I was sick, because no person can actually diagnose themselves. So I was not able to diagnose myself and say, well, now I am sick because of this job. I only understood that something was wrong with me, that I was beginning to not to sleep at night. I was beginning to have flashbacks and scary thoughts and all of those.
And you were fired in 2019, right? So, why? What was the reason for the company, or what did they put forward when they fired you?
So in 2019, they actually lied and said that I was engaged in a behavior that intimidated other workers, whereas in actual fact, they only were looking for reasons to justify their firing of me, because they were only firing me because I actually began to organize my colleagues for a union, because we were trying to have a conversation with them about our working conditions and how those working conditions were problematic, how those working conditions were actually causing us to be sick, because I am sick right now. So we tried to have a conversation with them about this, and they did not want to do that. In fact, they kept on telling us that we need them. They were doing us a favor, and that is the narrative that they push even today, that they are doing us a favor, and it's either we do the job or we go home. So I decided, okay, let's unionize, because we needed better protection. And better protection actually means that you must have the protection of a union, because then a union will be able to bargain on your behalf, and no one can actually fire you, because you have the protections of a union, which is then backed by law. So I was fired essentially because I was trying to fight for our rights as workers. I was saying to my colleagues, let's fight for our rights and let us not die in silence.
And I know that, Daniel, since 2019, you've been thinking a lot about how to improve the system, how content moderation, how the working conditions can be improved, but also the whole system. So, what are two measures that the social media companies have to take in order to ensure that content moderation gets out of the precarious area and becomes a job that, is a labor that humans can do under fair and under good conditions?
So throughout my time of thinking about this, I actually realized that the biggest problem with content moderation is that we are expendable or easily replaceable. And by that I mean, for example, in 2019 they used to tell us that we are useless, they are doing us a favor, and in fact, if they wanted to fire us, they would fire us then and find someone on the street. And by finding someone on the street, the job right now as it stands means that you can easily go in the street, find someone who is able to use a computer and be able to speak a certain language, then you have your content moderator. That's how easily replaceable a content moderator is. But now I have actually realized that if we can professionalize content moderation, that will actually address the problem of easily being replaceable. And at the same time, professionalizing content moderation would actually mean that the job becomes more professional in terms of producing quality results. So here what I mean is that if you have a content moderator who is not able to apply or interpret policy, because content moderators are actually policy interpreters to content, you will have people making mistakes because I'm under pressure and I don't, and since I have PTSD or whatever, I'm not going to be able to do my job perfectly. That's why some content would seep in or seep through, and then you'll end up with misinformation or disinformation ending up in the public sphere, and then nations or ethnic groups go into to war, as we have seen. The second thing that needs to be done is to make sure that proper mental health care support is available for content moderators 24/7. So when I need content, when I need the support of a psychologist, it can't be once a week or twice a week or once a month. It has to be available for my usage every single hour of the day. So let's say, for example, I begin experiencing problems at night and I'm at home, and such support is not available with me. I might even end up committing suicide because I have no support. So this support is important in two respects. One, it will allow me that I am better safe. Secondly, it will make sure that I am able to do my job properly and make sure that the results that I produce are of the highest quality, and make sure that I myself as a content moderator am safe, and also ensure that users as well are safe.
And to wrap up the interview, Daniel, so there's a bunch of people sitting here, and maybe some of them are curious to know what they can do to support content moderators.
So in the immediate, I think this is an emergency situation, because I can go on a rant and talk about a host of other things that can be done to support content moderation and even this professionalization that I speak of. But I think of the most important thing right now is to try and support the moderators in Kenya who are currently facing redundancy and who are not being paid by SAMA. And here we are talking about people who are coming from different foreign countries. And essentially, they are stranded there. Some don't have money to buy food. Some don't have money to pay for rent. So basically, their basic essentials are not being catered for. So the most important thing, while this redundancy case is ongoing, I think what the people can do is to try and make donations however they could, and make sure that those people, those moderators, on top of the stress, the emotional stress that I believe they are already going through because of the job that they do, at least at the very least, the shock of not being paid, the shock of not being able to buy food, of not being able to pay for rent is absorbed in the interim. And we can do that by donating to a fund that they have created in Kenya.
Thank you. I have sneaked the QR code into my last slide. So 184 content moderators have been unlawfully fired in April, and they've set up a fundraiser. So there's a QR code on the last slide if you want to support them. Thanks so much, Daniel, for joining us and for sharing some insights and your thoughts on how this field can be improved. Both of us, thank you. We would like to end this talk by shining a light on the field of content moderation, by amplifying the voices of content moderators themselves. I have mentioned that 150 of them gathered in Nairobi in May, and we want to show you a short clip of the gathering now to end the talk. Thank you so much.
For those probably who do not really understand what is content moderation, we are soldiers who work in dark space, whose employer do not want them to be known or seen, but we are there behind the curtains, doing whatever we can do, sacrificially, withholding nothing to offer our lives, to protect what has been called community, and the community has forgotten about us. And I want to say we are part of that community.
Have you seen yourselves? You're so young, you're so vibrant, you're so talented. It is a shame to put an end to that talent when you're this young.
What happens to an 18-year-old person who leaves school and gets a content moderation job? They get exposed, and after some time, you are just disposed like we have just been disposed now.
You can't take people from their countries and treat them like dirt, like they are disposable, like we are toilet paper. It hurts.
We are the front line of defense, and we need to make people like Mark Zuckerberg and every other social platform realize that without us, there is no social platforms.
Thank you.